Hi, this is Owen Astrachan for Compsci 342, April 10th, 2024. Topic of the day, corporate contributions to the web and the internet. In the news today, as I record this, which was Tuesday, Washington Post, OpenAI prepares to fight for its life as legal troubles mount. The company has hired more than 24 in-house lawyers and adopted a new Washington playbook. I think the headline speaks a little more loudly than is actually the case. It is true that OpenAI has been subject to several class action lawsuits related to copyright, but I'm not sure at all that it's fighting for its life. I think that's clickbait at best. Administrivia. ABABs, you should be up to date on those based on what was in class last time. ABAB 10 and 11 due Monday and Monday, the 15th and the 22nd. Project Phase 2, Imperceptive Now. An executive summary. Please see the project outline for details. It says there it's due April 14th, accepted through the 15th. You will also be getting a form to complete about your first week of work. You'll get that over the weekend. That form counts for a third of this Phase 2. That's 1% of your total course grade. The rest of it is based on whether you meet the minimal effort threshold for Phase 2. Please see the guidelines both in Perceptive and on the project website for what you need to do to meet that minimal effort threshold. We had a WOTO a week ago asking, what would you give up for a week? And you can see here, most of you would give up Amazon. That's either shopping, or some of you may be watching some streaming videos or movies on Amazon Prime, but by far more of you would give that up. And then after that, it'd be Meta. Again, Facebook isn't really in your demographic. Instagram and WhatsApp, perhaps more so. Almost none of you are willing to give up Google. And after that, not many are going to be giving up Apple. More of you are going to give up Microsoft. That's out of curiosity. You can check that out and see what you think. But when it comes to corporate stock, it's a huge advantage for NVIDIA. And as a reminder, NVIDIA makes chips that are commonly used in training and querying large language models. So you can see here it's trading at $900 a share when this went out. And most of you put in your reasons, I don't see any reason that NVIDIA is slowing down. After that, most of you took Microsoft, again, perhaps because of ChatGPT, since Microsoft is doing very well these days. What that means is unclear. I'm just sharing the results with you. We already seen that, so that's a duplicate. Let's skip it. Internet companies and the world. China's internet giants ordered $5 billion worth of NVIDIA chips to power their AI ambition. That's from Reuters, which is an international news organization. You can see that's August of last year. Internet companies and the world. Has China lost its taste for the iPhone? This is about 2 weeks ago, perhaps 3. And Apple had a huge stake in China, and it may be that that's lessening. True? Untrue? New York Times article might be interesting. As a reminder from a few years ago in Compsci 201, or last semester if you took it then, what is computer science? My claim, my definition is it is the study of automating algorithmic processes that scale. At one point I had that in Wikipedia, and then that entry was taken down. I'm hoping I can make that come back. I'm going to need a publication to make it happen, but I think it's a succinct and reasonable definition for computer science. It's not just programming, it's about scale. And it's about taking algorithms and realizing them as programs. So we're going to talk about scale in terms of the web and the internet and what you think about, but I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about some Duke alums and contributions they have made. First, some standards. It turns out that the internet ecosystem has been driven lately by companies. We just saw what you all thought about NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, and Google. Companies make their products better because most of them care about their clients. Caring about their clients will make them more money. Open source does help. We heard Scott Guthrie last week talk about a change in Microsoft that was largely driven by him and aided by others in terms of making Microsoft a more open source forward company. Now, these contributions are not done exclusively by Duke alums, but I'm going to highlight some of them, and then also talk about other standards that aren't necessarily done by Duke alums. So, Internet standards have emerged over time, often initially developed by companies. So, for example, QUIC is a successor of TCP, the Transmission Control Protocol, that governs all packets on the internet. The internet runs on TCP. QUIC was a protocol initially developed by Google, taken up by the Internet Engineering Task Force, the IETF, and then made into an internet standard. HTML3, which is the most recent web standard, is built on top of QUIC. Here is a diagram from Akamai, one of the preeminent content distribution /CDN companies. And you can see here in the middle is QUIC. And on the right of this diagram, you see HTTP3, which is built on top of IETF QUIC. And in this diagram, you can see the green TLS, which is the secure part of HTTP, is now built into that, rather than on the right of this diagram where you see HTTP2 built on top of TLS, which is built on top of TCP. And every time you build a protocol on top of another protocol, it has the potential to slow things down. Here is a diagram similar to that one from Uber, who claims that QUIC has helped them immensely in making their product faster and more responsive to customers. So underneath it all, you see the Internet Protocol. That's how packets are routed on the internet. And if you take a networking course, you might understand more about the difference between TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, and UDP, Uniform Datagram Protocol. TCP is reliable. If a packet is dropped, it will be retransmitted, and that requires an acknowledgement and a back and forth, more traffic. UDP is arguably less reliable because you can drop a packet and it still works. QUIC is built on top of UDP. QUIC is then extended to HTTP3, the most recent web standard. Just as a reminder, the web is built on top of the internet. They are separate things. So we can see here the old, or still in some places current, web, HTTP2, built on top of TLS for security, built on top of TCP for packets. Whereas the more recent, HTTP3, built on top of QUIC, built on top of UDP. The nuances of these differences are something that you would study, for example, in Compsci 356, networking. But the basics of how they became standards, that's a topic for this course, Compsci 342. You'll be asked to review this URL, which is Uber and QUIC, as part of the first WOTO. Now, some other standards that have become more ubiquitous. MapReduce, which is a functional programming way of how Google first indexed the web. Indexing the web requires crawling it, visiting essentially every web page that's not protected by a robots.txt or some other mechanism. We've talked about the surface web as opposed to the deep web and the dark web. MapReduce is a standard for ensuring that parallel distributed programming works as it should. The open source Apache Hadoop project was spun out of Google's MapReduce. Google patented it, or tried to patent it in 2010. It had been filed in 2004 and the patent was granted. It expires in 2026, but it's what's called an open patent. It's for defensive purposes. Google will not sue companies about this patent. In fact, what they'll do is make sure that nobody else can sue because Google has patented it and will not assert the patent against other companies. That's, as a reminder, the intellectual property part of IP squared, the basis for Compsci 342. That brings us to one more example of open source, in some cases, gone wrong. A company called Elasticsearch at elastic.co had a cloud search software. Search turns out to be a very important topic, not just for consumers such as you and me who are browsing the web looking for a good place to eat or how to get from point A to point B, but for companies who have millions of documents or web pages and need to be able to search them. Elastic was built, to run in the cloud in AWS, but it had some security issues. Another company named Florigan came along and developed security plugins. Now, Florigan did this with Amazon's blessing, for lack of a better phrase. So Amazon took Elastic's open source product, Elasticsearch, forked it, meaning they made their own distribution, made it more secure, renamed it as eventually OpenSearch rather than Elasticsearch, and gave it away, quote, for free. It's an open source product. Elastic was selling its open source product, but now it was competing with Amazon, and it's very difficult to compete with Amazon. So Elastic relicensed its software, no longer open, but using what's called the Elastic license, and then sued. In theory, this was going to be a copyright violation, saying that Amazon and Florigan, this company mentioned at the first part of the slide, had copied their software, and they were up against Amazon. Ultimately, they settled because, again, it's difficult to go up against Amazon. I had something to do with this copyright case in my work as an expert witness. I can't say much more about it because it's settled. And again, I'm working on a copyright case, which is why I'm not in class personally. But the key is Amazon OpenSearch is not Elasticsearch. And you can see Amazon was forced to rename, to rebrand their product instead of Amazon Elastic, which was reasonably confusing with Elasticsearch. So Amazon had to rebrand and reevaluate. Now, cookies. Cookies are how a website knows you visited it. The HTTP standard is stateless. So if you want to visit a website and then visit it again, how will it know that you were already there? The way that works is cookies. The APT system uses cookies to know how many times you've submitted during a run, as it were. There's an IETF standard, but cookies have been, according to some, compromised by advertising agencies, so-called third-party cookies. Now, Google has tried to develop alternatives to third-party cookies, and apparently, depending on when you believe apparently, eventually these third-party cookies will disappear from Chrome, which means they'll disappear from everything. But advertising drives Instagram. Advertising drives Google. And so without advertising, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So there are these cookie conundrums. Web privacy standards have been arguably overseen by companies like Google. You can see here, grand fancy plan for privacy targeted ads, and we just saw that cookies are going away. But the W3C, the group that makes web standards, has been dominated by Google, unlike the IETF, which is not dominated so much by corporate interests, but by individuals who may represent corporations, but still, the IETF and the W3C are very different organizations in terms of the kinds of people and companies that run them. So privacy, when not regulated by laws like the EU's GDPR or more recent related plans in the US, make it difficult to make sure that your personal information is kept private. So, WOTO 1, which is a brief WOTO, except you will be asked to look at the Uber the Uber model for quick. And so it might take you 5 to 10 minutes. You should pause this video and go complete that. Boopity boop boo. Paused. All right, continue when you're ready because this is not going to be done together in class. Now, Duke alumni and the internet. I just talked about companies, but here's a brief overview of some alumni and then the final WOTO of 410. Tom Truscott, who was a grad student just finishing his master's degree when I started at Duke, but started Usenet, which is the precursor to every peer-to-peer and news organization on the internet. He and friends of his at UNC invented Usenet. You can read about it on Wikipedia. He won the first Electronic Frontier Foundation Pioneer Award among the group for inventing this. The NNTP, the Network News Transfer Protocol, was a standard in 1986. Because it was a standard, it was an assignment for what was Compsci 308 at the time in spring of 2001. And arguably, Tom Truscott, by inventing Usenet, was essentially procrastinating while he was getting his master's degree, which still turned out to be a great move for him. He is a good guy and did invent what is perhaps the precursor for all web traffic. Usenet created in 1986, well before the web, but while there was still peer-to-peer news and image sharing on the internet. I encourage you to read about Usenet and see where it's still used. Noam Shazir at Google. Here's a video that describes Noam's early contributions. There's also an article in the New Yorker magazine about how Noam, when he was early at Google, invented Did You Mean, which isn't so ubiquitous. It's just built into the AI parts of Google search, but it was an earth-shattering development when you didn't have to worry about how you type things because Google would correct it for you, since it knew what most people meant when they typed something, since they would correct it on their own, and now Google was able to correct it for them. That was a keen insight. He continued to develop products at Google, AdSense, TensorFlow, large language models, but he left Google because he didn't think they were moving quickly enough in AI, and he's now the CEO of essentially a spinoff, but it's not because it's his own company, Character.ai, and he has hundreds of patents. Nate Bronson was at Meta/Facebook, and he developed many of their open source tools to make Meta's and Facebook's website and applications run quickly. React, which is a JavaScript library, PyTorch, which is a Python interface to large language models, JavaScript tools, and hardcore deep C++ libraries that eventually became open source. And now he works for a different company in Boston. And he has contributed greatly to how Meta works with performance. We saw Greg Badros as a guest in our class. You can see him in this diagram on the bottom left. Here are all the top executives who actually run Facebook. Now it's difficult to see who everybody is, but in the middle on the bottom row, you'll see Mark Zuckerberg. On Mark Zuckerberg's right, our left, you'll see Sheryl Sandberg. And to Sheryl Sandberg's right, you'll see Greg Badros, who talked to our class. So all of these people have made incredible contributions to the internet and the web. Finally, the last WOTO, you'll get credit by saying, here's my t-shirt size, or I don't want one. Again, for full credit, you must complete this by 10 a.m. the day after class. That will be Thursday. Enjoy, and I hope to see you soon when I'm done my task here in California. Thank you.